welcome to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast. My name is Kelly Allen, and this is our host, Tom Argersinger.
And this week we're going to be diving into what is wrong with modern education.
You are listening to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we're critiquing modern education, and Tom, it's not looking good.
No, it's not looking good. We have a lot to talk about today,
Yes.
so we probably just ought to jump right in. There's a lot of research that's been done with this particular...
We have done a lot of research.
A lot of research.
Yes.
And you know, some of it's not great.
Right.
And so we want to get into that, but we also want to end on a hopeful note, and there is a lot of hope as well. So why don't we just jump into the questions?
Okay, so in my research, I found out that math and reading scores have dropped to their lowest levels in more than 2 decades. And my question is, why?
Yeah, boy, and that could be like a 3-hour podcast just in itself, right?
It sounds like an easy question to answer, but it's not.
It's a multi-factor thing. And I think depending on your perspective, you want to basically say, well, it's because of X, because that's just simpler.
Yeah.
And one of the things about, being educated, an educated person, is to realize that the world is often not very simple.
Right.
And so we can certainly begin by saying, well, at least part of the problem was what we experienced during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And maybe we can start there, with what that might look like.
Yeah.
And so that was back, 2020, 2022, in that general range. Before that, there were already trends that were happening. And I think that's the thing that gets lost in all of the rhetoric.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that learning loss from the pandemic is a real thing.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, we've got some stats there, I think, about reading and math.
Yeah. It just says that what I've written down is that it's its lowest in 2 decades. More students than ever before are scoring below the National Assessment of Education Progress threshold for basic mastery skills.
Yeah, that's the thing that's the most shocking, I think, about all the research. I mean, you can kind of boil it down.
Yeah.
And by the way, just to be clear, there are people who would say that this research is somewhat biased somehow or the other. But it is a litmus test for American education. It has been for years.
Right.
So the most shocking thing, I think, well, maybe focus on reading first.
Yeah.
So depending on how you interpret the data, somewhere between like 62 and 70% of the kids in 8th grade, particularly, we'll talk about 8th, they do it in 4th and 8th, we'll talk about 8th, are actually scoring below proficient. And that's not ideal.
Yeah.
That is not good.
So how is the pandemic involved in that?
Well, I think I think the pandemic exacerbated a lot of the underlying structural weaknesses that were already present in American education in general.
Okay.
And by the way, I should say, when we talk about American education or modern education is in trouble, I'm not necessarily just referring to public schools.
Right.
I'm referring to schools across the board, depending on how it's being approached, right? So the pandemic uncovered some of those structural weaknesses. One of those, many studies would say, is parental involvement.
Okay.
Because the idea of remote learning is only effective if 2 things are present.
Yeah.
One, students have a fair amount of self-initiation. That is not true of many students.
Yeah.
Secondly, that there is robust parental involvement in the education. That is also generally not that true, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. So those 2 weaknesses in the structure, along with the sociological problems of being isolated, kind of being marginalized in some ways, and especially for kids that already had trouble learning in various ways, maybe special needs, or just people that just were not needed different modalities. It was just brutal, really, for them. So
and isolation leads to depression, which would affect learning as well, right?
It definitely does, and that's why it's so complicated to talk about this, right? I mean, we started to make a list here of just reasons why, not just the pandemic, but why the learning loss. Why is there so much? The scores are dipping, and they continue to dip in math and reading across America.
Right.
And the question is why? The pandemic is one of those reasons.
Yeah.
But you kind of brought up the whole idea of the emotional side, which was clearly exacerbated by the pandemic. So did you find anything in your research that would kind of maybe talk about that side of it a little bit?
Yes. Let's see. It says anxiety is a historical phenomenon, but there's a study of children's anxiety that said by the 1980s, normal children were scoring higher than 1950s children in psychiatric patients.
Well, yeah, the kids that were in psychiatric payments in the 50s were showing similar responses and symptomatic things of average kids in the 80s.
Right.
And I don't want to, is that basically what it said?
That had to do with my research of playtime in schools.
Okay.
And what the American Academy of Pediatrics was saying was that preschools were reducing playtime and or reducing playtime and increasing focus on academic achievement.
Which is very true across the board,
Which kind of leads to anxiety because, children are more isolated. They're not playing with each other. So I don't know. Those are just some of the things that I came up with.
I think that's a great question. I think it raises a great question, right?
Yeah.
Because the not having enough physical playtime, maybe the way we could say is physical playtime.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that affects how kids learn. And that kind of spins us around into the importance of developmental approaches to learning.
Yeah.
One of the things in my research I came across, which I had learned this a long time ago, I had forgotten, that there's a difference between a developmental approach and developmentalism.
Yeah.
As a way of approaching education in like a formal way. For example, CCS, where we do our educational work, we have a developmental approach, which essentially says in so many words that you don't treat a preschooler the same way you do a fourth grader.
Exactly.
You don't treat a fourth grader the same way you do an eighth grader when it comes to how they deal with various aspects of life, whether it's the emotional side, the physical side, the intellectual side, the spiritual side, or whatever it might be. So that's really the developmental approach. Developmentalism goes one step further, and this is actually super common today, and it was common in a number of programs that came out in the last 20 years in education. High scope preschool curriculum is one of these. But basically it said, so because of the developmentally appropriate approach, that means that teachers should have a minimum of intervention.
Okay.
So the whole thing now becomes a very student-centered environment where the kids get to choose whether they move from this station to this station or whatever it might be.
Right.
Which is, again, nuance, right? I mean, so the developmental approach would say, well, yeah, I mean, there's a certain sense in which some of that is good, but at the same time, it's okay to have teacher intervention, because that's how teacher leadership is one of the ways that helps kids learn.
Yeah, it's how teachers teach.
Right, and so especially when they're younger.
Yeah.
But as they grow up, then they move, like the learner trajectory we talk about, which is from a dependent learner to an independent learner to an interdependent learner. So you can't necessarily expect a 5-year-old to be an interdependent learner because they haven't gone through the process cognitively and developmentally and emotionally and various other things.
Right.
So that's why education is a profession, because there is a lot to know.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about why learning loss, so we've kind of touched on the pandemic and exacerbating those underlying structural weaknesses, but there are a lot of societal reasons too.
Yeah.
That we need to address.
You were saying something before we started the podcast, and you said there's 15% of students are absent.
Yeah, absenteeism is a major problem in education right now. Yeah. Because depending on where you do the studies, you're talking about, on a given day, 10 to 20% of kids are just not in school. And that's significantly higher than it's ever been. Yeah. And I remember working in New York City during the pandemic and thereafter, particularly during the pandemic, and there were kids who just dropped off the face of the earth, essentially. Right. Nobody knew where they were. Yeah. And there was no way to find out exactly, so it was very weird and very complicated. But yeah, that chronic absenteeism continues
after the pandemic.
After the pandemic,
okay,
yeah, because it's now the pandemic was essentially more or less over by 22, maybe the beginning of 23. Yeah. Now it's 25, going on 26, and that chronic absenteeism has remained robust. And at the end of the day, if a kid doesn't want to come to school, how do you make them come to school? Well, it's a law in America. You have to attend school. Yeah. There's lots of debates, though, on how far do you let it go before you intervene. What are you going to do with somebody? Yeah. You're going to put them in jail because they don't go to school? I mean, it's complicated, like pretty much everything we're talking about. It is complicated. But yeah, chronic absenteeism, if you're not there, it's difficult to learn.
Yeah, it's difficult to score well in tests.
Yep, if you believe that's important.
Yeah.
And that also has changed.
That's true. Okay, talk about that a little bit. I'm interested in that.
So a lot of the shifting that's going on in American education has been increasing disagreement. You know what's weird is that about what you should learn.
Yeah.
Should you be tested on what you learn? Is it more important to do trade-related stuff or to actually do more intellectual cognitive work that's beyond what you might do in learning a trade?
Yeah.
What's more important? Interestingly, Aristotle actually has a quote on that. I mean, he was a really smart guy. And one of the things, let me just see if I can find it real quick, because I think it's worth our time. Let's see, it was Milton, a lot of good quotes here. Well, I think we're going to try to put some of these in the show notes. This is what Aristotle said, like way back in the BC days. Should the useful in life, or should virtue, so the useful in life being like practical stuff, practical skills. Should the useful in life, or should virtue, character, or should the higher knowledge, like intellectual skills of wisdom and discernment, all that, which of these three should be the aim of our training? All three have been entertained. About the means, how we do it, there is no agreement, Aristotle says.
Wow.
For different ideas about the nature of virtue, what constitutes character, naturally disagree about how you practice it.
This is still going on.
And it's, literally, thousands of years later, and it's the exact same discussion, right?
Yes.
Is it more important to teach people practical skills? Is it more important in education just to do character type things?
Yeah.
Or is it really about developing the higher intellectual skills? I personally believe it's really all three. I think you have to make the intellectual skills practical. In everyday life. Another thing I just read, I think it was yesterday, Harvard is introducing this focus on the trades. It's a $500 million fund for helping kids that go to Harvard get into the trades.
Okay.
So it's like Harvard Trade School.
Wow.
And it's like $500 million. You can even see the shift in the Ivy League moving from really more of that, the deeper intellectual stuff, at least at some level, right? It doesn't mean they don't do that at all. I'm just saying that they're adding this huge thing.
Right.
Which, is that good? Yeah, I mean, it's good in one sense, but at the end of the day, if we don't learn how to think well, then how are we going to learn how to discern stuff? How are we going to understand what's right and wrong?
Right.
How are we going to understand whether that's a great idea or it's a poor idea?
Right.
We're going to go by our emotions a lot more. We're going to go by we're going to get a lot of echo chambers going on. We're going to get a lot of people around us that just say yes to what we're thinking.
Right.
But the idea of robust dialogue is based on the idea that you can think logically and you can recognize logical fallacies when they happen. In other words, hey, what you're saying doesn't make sense because of this.
Right.
And so I think we lose a lot by just assuming that the answer to everything is to make everybody into a tradesman.
Right.
First of all, I don't think society can support that. But now, of course, there are more stats coming out that saying we're running out of certain tradespeople.
Right.
Okay, fair. I'm not saying we should do away with trade training or we shouldn't expand it. I'm simply saying we shouldn't do away with the higher level thinking training.
Yes.
Because that's what's going to make us better citizens.
Yeah, you would think better society.
Right, and you can make an argument that the retreat from that, if you look at historical trends, I could make an argument that as we began to retreat from the concept that higher level thinking is important, and everything became super practical, almost hyper practical.
Yeah.
To where now,
and I would say education kind of went that way
there's
too.
There's a tremendous amount of pressure on education, right?
Right.
To become a trade school in so many words.
Yeah.
Because it all becomes...
And super practical.
Yeah, super practical because it's hyper-focused on economics. What do I need to do to get a job?
Yeah.
Well, that's a very important thing. That's why, back to Aristotle, all three of those things are important. You do need to have practical skills. So the issue now is like AI.
Yeah.
Should people know how to use AI? Yes. They should. They should know how to use it well.
Yes.
And wisely,
And
which
think it
requires
through.
them
Yeah.
to think deeply
Yeah.
about AI, right? And that's
Yeah.
what I'm afraid is that without that piece, and if we focus just on the practical side, I'm not saying that's not important, it is. But if that's all we focused on, I think we're kind of stuck
Yeah.
in actually figuring out answers to some of the more complicated problems, which is pretty much all of them.
Yes. Now, you touched a little bit on character development.
Yeah.
So how do you think that plays a role in student success?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely central.
Yeah.
I mean, we believe that certainly at CCS, and from a gospel-centered education standpoint, it's absolutely crucial. And what's interesting is that you can go back and look at great statesmen and thinkers since Aristotle and Plato, all the way through to just recently, and especially just up to the mid-20th century. And everyone agreed. This is really important. But now, like so many things, well, what does it mean to have good character?
Right.
Who gets to define what good character is? And in my view, that's been harmful. Because once we start not agreeing on so we may have a value that says character development is really important. Well, it doesn't help if we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? Having said that, most people in society would agree that basic honesty is still important, I think.
Yeah.
You know, basically treating people well is a good thing. But yeah, character, I think, is central. And I think from a faith-based perspective, that's where a lot of folks that don't have a faith-based perspective sometimes struggle. Because the question of who decides what's good character is kind of up for grabs.
Yeah.
Is it natural law in society? Is it the largest group of people decide? Is it my tribe that decides or whatever?
Right.
For those of us who have a Christian perspective, we would say that God gets to decide
Okay.
what a great character is.
So what does that look like in a gospel-centered education setting?
Yeah, I think it's reinforcing kingdom values. You know,
Okay.
it starts with fairly obvious ones like treating people fairly, justice, equity to the extent possible, honesty, and all those things. But it's also the deeper virtues, things like wisdom, which, by the way, if I could sum up everything we're talking about in this podcast, that's changed. Almost no one that I've been reading and the courses I've been taking and everything, almost no one ever mentions the word wisdom in relationship to education. And I think that's very telling.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's very telling. So it's about skills, it's about skill sets, hard skills, maybe soft skills. But again, the ability because wisdom really, in essence, means living well. How do you live well in whatever milieu you're placed? And wisdom is that and a lot of other things too.
Yeah.
Like for a Christian, the beginning of wisdom is really beginning with a fear of God, realizing that God is in charge. He created everything. He knows best, and He's in charge. And since He created us, He knows what it takes for us to flourish. And people can say, well, gee, you're a Christian, and so all the questions have been answered. You don't need to even think about anything. That's not true. Because even the questions that have been answered for us through the Word of God, through the Bible, still have to be lived out, and we still have to figure it out. How do we live this out, especially in a complicated world?
Yeah.
Yeah, so character is absolutely central.
Yeah. And we all want our students to flourish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who gets to decide what it means to flourish, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to keep circling around to that, but again, if you talk to 5 different groups in America today, they're going to have 5 different versions of flourishing.
That's true.
I mean, is it kind of people who subscribe more to some of the woke agenda things? That, for example, we can go into a lot of different examples on that. We will in successive podcasts from here. So I won't do that today. Is that how we determine what should be talked about and taught and the perspective? Or is it, a hyper-individualism?
Yeah.
Which is rampant in America, hyper-individualism, hyper-skepticism. I'm not going to believe anything anybody says, especially if it's a large group of people.
Right.
I'm only going to believe my friends.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. It's tricky. We'll talk about some of those tricky things later. I don't want to give too much away today.
Yeah. So let me bring up something that I thought was interesting in my research. There's something called alpha schools, and they're popping up all over the United States. And what they are is basically it's 2-hour learning, and it claimed, and they're AI schools. The AI is the teacher. And then they have adults in the room that are guides, and it claims that students can complete core subjects in 2 hours.
A day, I suppose.
A day. And then the rest of the day is for collaborative workshops, doing other things like maybe life skills.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, maybe
okay.
like learning how to start a business and stuff like that.
Practical skills.
Practical skills.
Yep.
So what do you feel about that? Why do you think parents are turning to that?
I'm not sure I don't know all the reasons why they are, but I can guess at some of them. I'm not as familiar with with Alpha Schools specifically. There's a lot of different models. Alpha Schools is probably a brand of micro schools, I would guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I think that offers to people is simplicity. It takes all the stuff that we're talking about and simplifies it. So it's like, hey, if you just do this, and again, I'm not saying it's wrong or anything. I'm just saying it fits American psyches.
Yeah.
If you just do this, it's going to be great. We'll let AI, which is cool. That's kind of thing. AI is cool. So we're going to let AI take care of what we might call the core content.
Yeah. It's like 30 minutes for math, 30 minutes for science.
Right. And of course, and then we'll take the rest of the day to build businesses and create whatever and, paint masterpieces or whatever it might be. It sounds awesome. But does it work?
I don't think we know yet.
That's the thing, right? Does it really? Because there's been so many things tried in education. And then again, who decides on what the content is? So that 30 minutes of math, is there a curriculum? I would assume there's some sort of curriculum that probably AI develops.
Yeah.
I do say this. First of all, I'm not a complete traditionalist when it comes to schooling. I've done tons of research about various, Howard Gardner from Harvard and various other people over the years, looking at different ways to do education. So it's not as if I believe getting kids into a room, sitting them in chairs, and all staring at the front of the room is the only way to do education. Okay. I don't believe that. But I do also think we should think critically. There we go again. We should think well about and ask good questions. Okay, so that's the model. Sounds very appealing. How do you know if it's working? And of course, the response could, based on our earlier part of the podcast, well, how's it working in regular education? Fair point, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want to shortchange the kids.
Yeah.
Because, and what if you have a struggle in math?
Right.
Then what happens? So there's a lot, I don't know enough about it to go into all those details, but I'm sure they've thought of that. But I think it sounds great. The question is, how does it work practically?
So that's why you think maybe parents are turning to it, because it sounds like a complete package where, it's like, sounds easy. And
if you think about, because we've touched on the anxiety part, right? One of the things that's true about American society and society in general around the world right now is that things are really complicated.
Yeah.
Whether it's security issues, whether it's political issues, whether it's just trying to get along with your neighbors, everything seems ridiculously complicated, which tends to raise the anxiety level in most normal people, right? All of a sudden now everything is negotiation, I heard somebody say. Every single thing in life is negotiation. That's hard. So I think people are looking for something, because the last thing, like for example, this podcast, the last thing the average parent really wants to hear is, this is super complicated.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, this is super complicated, and if you listen to our podcast for 5 hours, you might actually understand one thing.
Yeah.
Because really what people want is, give me the 3 takeaways. This is LinkedIn.
Right.
Give me the 3 takeaways for everything.
Yeah.
It's like, unfortunately, guys, and this is hard.
We're going to have to think.
You got to think about this.
Yeah.
Because my response to that is, how has that served us as a society? Has it made better people? The 3 takeaways? Has it made us better? I'm not saying that's not useful, and I use it too, right, to improve certain aspects of my job and things. But as far as learning how to learn and to be truly educated and to actually be a person in society that's a contributor and all those things, I think we need more than just 3 ways to become better at AI.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, as useful as that sometimes can be.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, again, I'm trying to steer into this middle, what I consider to be more of a middle course, which is it's hard for people nowadays. So back to your question, it's just easier, I think. And I'm not saying it's the only reason, but I think part of it is it's just easier. I can plug my kids into that, and I don't have to think about that much anymore, too much. And I can think now about paying the rent or whatever it is their number one issue is.
Yeah. When I was looking into those schools, there were a lot of kids saying that they were bored in traditional schools. Yeah. And they, parents wanted to offer them something different. And when you were talking about individualism, what did you mean by that?
I mean that America was founded and was developed as a country, and this is a historical fact, and you could just basically look anywhere. It rewards individualism.
Okay.
More so than many countries of the world. There are many, especially Eastern and even some countries in the West and Europe and various places, that reward collectivism, that reward, really deep intergenerational tie. And that has not, I mean, there is pockets of that in America, but it's not as societally common.
Because I could kind of see that in the AI schools, because the kids were saying, well, I wanted to excel faster.
Yeah.
Like I could excel faster in math than my peers, and
Right.
so that's why I wanted to do this, so that
Yeah.
I could go through my coursework quicker.
Yeah,
so that was interesting.
So that hyper-individualism, or that sounds pejorative. So the focus on individualism is so much a part of the fabric of our country, as is competition.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they're connected, and you just gave an illustration of the connection with those things.
Yeah,
So if
that's true.
the way our society works is we have to be competitive pretty much in order to succeed in the world, in America, then that's going to drive a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's also, this radical person autonomy. We've talked about a little bit that last year, and that's a huge thing in the West. Person autonomy, which essentially means nobody can tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Well, when you put hyper-skepticism, I don't trust anyone who's not in my group, with hyper-individualism, which is, it's really more about the individual than the collective or the group, generally, at the end of the day, at least. And then you add in the radical person autonomy, and you mush those together, what you have is a picture that drives a lot of decision-making. It's a philosophical way of living.
Yeah.
The tricky part is that's not really the biblical picture.
Right. That's a tough classroom to teach.
Yeah, it's a tough, right.
And
that's exactly what's happening, right?
There's distrust for the teacher and for,
If people can't follow rules very well and they don't trust authority and they really want to define their own curriculum or whatever it might be, at least towards that, then what does that look like?
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of the questions in modern education are.
Yes.
Because their assumptions are the way we think about this is not only normal, but it's good. To which I take a deep breath and a step back and go,
Is it?
Is it? Is it good? Again, how is that working out in real life, right?
Yeah.
From a biblical gospel.
Scores don't look good.
Right. Well, people would say the reason why the scores don't look good is because kids have changed, to your earlier point.
Okay.
And therefore schools have not adjusted. So if schools would just adjust, they'd be fine.
Yes. That's going to lead to my next question.
Go ahead.
But finish your thought.
No, I mean, that's okay, because I could go on for hours. That's
okay. Well, what aspects of the traditional classroom structure are evolving?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what we just said, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably boil all the changes down into one basket, which is the change from being teacher-centered to student-centered.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the largest shifts over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Definitely over the last 20. But even the last 10 years still continues to be this huge shift, which, by the way, for the record, I think is not all bad.
Okay.
There's good things about moving from a hyper-teacher-focused experience in education.
Right.
I think there's a lot of limitations to that.
Yeah.
And I think that students need to be more involved in the classroom, some of the classroom decision-making and those things. However, I think like so many things, we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, oh, well, if we're either going to be teacher-centered or we're going to be student-centered. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why do we have to do that? Why can't we think in a more nuanced way and say, yes, we should have more. So the way I like to say it is, we should be teacher-led and student-informed.
I like that.
At the end of the day, I still think there is a leader in the classroom. And if they're a good leader, they're going to exhibit the traits of a good leader. And they're going to help kids to engage. They're not just going to talk at them all the time, right? And students the learning should be student informed. They should have input. I think that's healthy. Same thing, by the way, with parenting.
Right.
It's the same pendulum.
Yeah, I could see that.
Parent-centered, kid-centered. And we see frankly, we see the results of a lot of that today, also in education.
Right.
Right? Because a lot of the things, a lot of the reasons why learning doesn't happen is that some families have changed. Which reminds me, so I'm going to read this list real quick. So we talked about how chronic absenteeism is a problem, how leftover COVID issues and learning loss is a huge thing. So I'm going to give you a big list of other things, right? We talked about this holistic tribal skepticism of intellectual pursuits. We didn't talk about that specifically, but that is a problem, especially in certain faith-based communities.
Okay.
Distrusting intellectualism.
Yeah, I can see that.
That if it's not simple, it's not good. Well, again, the problem comes in trying to discern and trying to use wisdom and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So here's another list, another thing on the list, grade inflation.
Grade inflation.
Grade inflation is a huge, you could do a podcast on any one of these, right? Grade inflation is a huge problem in America.
Do you mean just focusing on grades?
No, I mean, well, it could be that, but it's maybe based in that, but it's more, you're going to get a B even if you don't really exactly deserve a B.
Oh, okay.
The dirty little secret of education. Somebody came up to me the other day and said, why are so many kids getting B's when they don't really know much? Because in teacher lore, right, if you're an educator or a lifelong educator, you realize that a kid who gets a C in a course, I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this, if a kid that gets a C in a course doesn't really know very much about that course.
Oh, okay.
Generally. I mean, that's kind of a teacher lore experience kind of thing, right? But I think that grade inflation is a huge problem. And that was also worsened during the pandemic because nobody was allowed to fail.
So you're saying teachers do that in
For
order
many
to make
reasons.
themselves look better?
No, I've known a lot of teachers, like hundreds and if not thousands of teachers over my career. I would not say that's the motivating factor for the vast majority of teachers.
Maybe they don't want to talk to the parents about it. Maybe it's the parents' fault.
You
Whose
as a
fault is
parent
it?
can say that. I think that let's put it this way, I think there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
There was pressure during COVID to make sure kids did not fail.
Yeah.
And they couldn't really have failed, and nobody really did, I think. Pretty much most markets, they didn't fail.
They just kept going.
Right? It just kind of kept going. And now it's like, well, how could my kid possibly be failing? Because if they're failing, that must mean that you didn't give them enough chances, or you didn't. Basically, the reason why they're failing is the teacher's fault.
Maybe they didn't do the work.
There's that. But the work wasn't at their level or wasn't appropriately designed for my kid, because if it's a student-centric environment,
that's true.
Then guess what? It's the teacher's job to ensure that somehow it's going to work for that kid.
These are issues in the classroom, for sure.
These are real issues in the classroom, and frankly, it's not one that people want to talk about very much.
Right.
Because they're hard, right? Are teachers always right about everything they decide in the classroom? No. Are parents always right in everything they decide about their kids? Speaking as a parent of 4 kids, I could heartily say no. Not always. There are some things I needed somebody to speak into my life and say, where did you get that idea? Right? So that's my perspective,
Yeah.
So yeah, let me just add a couple more here because these were so encouraging. Addictive, attention-destroying personal tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
We haven't even touched on that, right?
We haven't, and I know we're going to.
We're going to, but that's a huge. So why are kids not learning? Well, you have to be able to focus for longer than 20 seconds,
right?
Or however long a TikTok video is, a few seconds.
Yeah.
You have to focus longer than that to learn something to really learn something. So that's a huge problem. Critical shortage of experienced teachers.
Yeah.
Not all teachers in the profession are good.
Right.
Some of them are great. Some of them, just like every profession, by the way, not every lawyer is great. Not every doctor is great.
And there's not very many teachers or people that want to be teachers.
Well, right. It's a really, really hard profession.
Yeah.
Listen, we could talk about that for a long time, too. Broken families. One of the underlying reasons why, for what we're talking about here, why is education not working well? One of the underlying reasons is what I call an elusive rootedness. And what I mean by that is kids that feel they have no roots. That somehow the roots, the things that root them, that stabilize them, that give them a stabilized sense of how the world works, is ripped out from underneath them. That happened during COVID to an extent, but now it's still an issue, I think. And the inner person suffers when you remove the stabilization.
Right.
So the idea that, for example, divorce doesn't really hurt kids. That's just statistically not true.
Right.
It really is not. So kids suffer and that's just one kind of destabilization, right? Yeah. And they suffer. Just looking around, well, another thing that's very destabilizing and very anxiety-producing in kids is security issues. As schools, we have to do drills.
Right.
And so we have to
with
teach...
even the little ones.
With even little ones. And then we have to teach teachers, well, what happens if there's an armed assailant in your classroom? Are you prepared to die to protect your kids?
Yeah.
Side.
That'll affect learning.
And it isn't just one thing. It's the weight. It's the weight of these multiple factors all coming through at once.
Right.
And not at once, but basically come together over time. And now it's multifactorial, like we said. Another thing, distant fathers. Fathers that are just not engaged in kids' lives, except maybe for sports.
Right.
But other than that, they don't really have anything to do with the kid's education at all. The mom does all of it. I wouldn't say that's a good idea for various reasons I can get into later. Declining emotional health and lack of resilience. Huge issue. Huge issue.
Yeah.
So what happens if I study and I don't do well? Well, I can't study any harder, quote unquote, because it makes me anxious to study hard.
And I don't like to do it.
Or I don't like to do it. Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not trying to be insensitive here, right? I'm not saying that there's not legitimate reasons why in some kids this is the way it is. I'm not at all talking about that. I'm talking about a more general trend across the board that almost every research project, almost every social worker, every teacher would say, on the whole, the average kid is not as resilient today as they were in the past. Part of the reason for that isn't really their fault. Part of the reason for that is that weight that like I had to grow up in my generation, our biggest thing we had to worry about was, depending on what neighborhood you grew up in, because it could be safety or whatever, but was like nuclear war.
Right.
And then we all got underneath the desks in our room as if that was going to actually do anything, right? We did the drills and everything, and then the horn, wah, wah, and you get underneath the desk. It's like, what was that even for? I don't even know what that was for. But now you take that kind of stuff and you just multiply it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
10x, and kids are carrying that weight, and they don't know how to offload it. Back to the developmental thing, right? They don't know how developmentally they're not ready.
Yeah.
Somebody was telling me the other day that our brains and our souls were never designed to take in all of the brokenness that we see on the evening news and now on the social media all day, every day.
All day, every day.
We were never designed to be able to process that level of brokenness, to have knowledge of it. Not saying you shouldn't listen to the news, it's not my point. But the general point is, this is why the weight is so heavy.
Yeah.
Right? And
that makes sense.
It's a tough thing. And then so that results in poor sleep habits, which is connected to technology and anxiety and all those things. And now with the rise of AI counselors that are literally just machines, really. And this is why, Kelly, I am so passionate about this season. Because I don't think it's ever been more difficult to be a kid.
Yeah.
I just don't. And whatever little bit we can do on this podcast to try to shed some light or at least open discussions on this, then I think, I feel like it'd be worth our while.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it is super complicated in some ways. But then there's also a sense in which it's actually pretty straightforward. How could it possibly be after everything we said?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, if God is who he says he is, and he created the universe, which means he created you and me and every kid at CCS and every kid in the entire world, every person in the entire world, as well as the natural creation, et cetera, et cetera. If that's true, if he is who he says he is, and he's the creator and the sustainer of all of creation, then who would be in a better position to decide what would allow us to flourish? I understand that some people listening to the podcast don't believe in my premise that
Right.
God actually does exist and the God of the Bible is who that God is. I understand there are people that don't agree with that. But at the end, I come back to, okay, how is this working for you?
It's not.
It's not really working very well. So we have 8 million self-help books. We have 20 million social platforms that are supposed to help us lead better and to run businesses better and to do all this kind of stuff. We have 40 million nonprofits to help people do whatever, and a lot of those are great. But what has it produced? Because we haven't been dealing with the root.
Right.
We haven't given kids any. We've told kids they evolved from protozoa out of mud, which basically tells them there is no real purpose in life. What is the point of all this? And now you get kids the majority of kids saying, my whole career goal is to be a social media influencer. That's it.
Right.
Okay. So anyway, so I think when we moved God out of the center of the picture to the frame, but also beyond the frame to just off the board completely, and we replaced it with scientific rationalism. We replaced him with other things.
And he has all the answers.
He does, and that's really annoying to people. How could anybody have all the answer? If you have the answer, again, if I'm radically personally autonomous, I don't want someone else to have the answers.
Right.
I want to have the answers.
Right.
And how is that working? It's too much pressure. It's like the whole idea that we're supposed to create our own identity. You tell a kid, like a teenager, hey, you can just design your entire identity.
There's too many options.
That's frightening. What does that even mean? And so you're picking and you're shoving things together, and it's like, oh, a little bit of this, and you get this pastiche, and then you go like, oh, and I'm going to change it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because somebody on some platform said it's not cool to do that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's simple. But I am saying if it hasn't worked out, perhaps we should try another way of looking at it.
Perhaps gospel-centered education.
Perhaps gospel-centered education, and which ultimately means a biblically centered way of seeing not just education, but all of life. So that's what we're going to get into this season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I get passionate about that stuff because it's really important to me still. More so than ever.
You've been doing it for so long.
And honestly, my enthusiasm for it or my passion for it really has not dimmed.
Yeah.
Because I care about kids.
Yeah.
And that's really what as we've kind of redirected GCE podcast, we're really trying to talk to anybody that loves and works with kids.
Yes.
Teachers especially, educators especially, but also other people, social workers, or just people who just in general, or parents, whatever.
Right.
So anyway, looking forward to this season.
Me too. And I think it should be said that if somebody is listening to this podcast and they have questions or they have comments, then go ahead and, comment, question.
Absolutely.
And
we'll try to address those.
Yeah. All of our information is in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
So thanks for doing this week. Getting us started. That's good.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
This was great.
So we'll end this way, this the way we generally do, and that is to remember one thing if you forget everything else that was said today. And this season, we're saying, if you forget everything else we say, remember to live out the kingdom of God. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Gospel Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida. You can find us online at myccs.org.